Hey guys, welcome back to the AJ Analysis channel, where today we are covering a real historic Champions League semi-final first leg tie between Inter and AC Milan. Historic for several different reasons. One, kind of the size of the derby. We know how big a rivals these two sides are, one of the biggest rivalries in football. But also historic for the fact that it's a semi-final. It's the opportunity to get to the Champions League final for the first time in a lot of years. But also I think it's a game which will be memorable for how easy it was for Inter. We're of course going to break down why it was so easy in this video. I think Inter though just were the better team by a mile. I think individually kind of the personnel just played much better than what the AC Milan players did. I thought the Inter players looked much more up for the occasion, but also they looked less kind of, what's the word for it? They looked more comfortable with the occasion. The Milan players at times looked kind of overwhelmed by the whole situation. That didn't seem to be the case for Inter. They seemed much more composed individually, but also tactically they were just so much better. So that is of course what we are getting into today. We've got a tactics board here. We'll kind of go through certain things which happened in the game, because for me, Inzaghi got this spot on. Pioli's tactics looked really dated. And, you know, I'm not talking like a season out of date. Like, this looked like we were watching a team from 20 years ago. Tactically really odd from AC Milan. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And actually, the whole focus of this video, perhaps surprisingly, is going to be AC Milan in possession, which may not make too much sense for a 2-0 Inter win. But it is what we're going to focus on, because I thought Inter were brilliant defensively, Milan were awful on the ball, and that combination made Inter therefore deadly. So it starts with AC Milan trying to play the ball up from the back. We've got Milan in goal, good ball playing goalkeeper, and Inter are going to really put the pressure on. It looks like a 5-3-2 on paper, which potentially suggests that they might be a little bit standoffish, a little bit defensive, a little bit cautious. That wasn't the case, because these wing-backs were not sitting back here operating as full-backs. These two were pressing super high. DeMarco up on Calabria and Dumfries up on Theo Hernandez. We then got Edin Dzeko and Martinez, the two forwards, going to go man for man with the two centre-backs. In midfield, we've got a man-for-man situation with Barella here, Mkhitaryan here, Calhanoglu kind of as the pivot on Diaz. And then we've got the back three, which is actually at times going to split quite wide. Darmian's going to come out on Salamakers, Acerbi here on Giroud, and Bastoni. And what we can see is that this is man for man, literally all over the pitch. It's a really bold and brave approach from Inter. Because when you go man for man all over the pitch, you just had to lose one of your duels and the opposition are in. So this was risky football from Inter. But what we can see, the effect it's going to have, is that Milan in goal has no one to go to. There is no spare man in the build-up for AC Milan. And that's a big problem because they have no one that they can pass to. Now, what AC kind of tried to do to counteract this was at times move Milan like this in between the centre-backs in the attempt to form a back three, with the idea being, if they form a back three up against the front two, they can outnumber Inter and therefore play from there. But Inter kind of didn't fall for that trap, because even when Milan's stepping forward with the ball between the two centre-backs, still the strikers stay wide. On the two centre-backs like this, they start wide and then basically they move from this position inwards. So they are applying pressure to Milan in goal, but also their cover shadow is going to stop the two centre-backs receiving the ball. And it just gave Milan absolutely no option on the ball. Milan didn't have the answer to this question, basically, and it just resulted in, quite often, them sending the ball long. It just meant that they couldn't get any control on the ball during that first 15 minutes, and this just led to constant turnovers from where Inter really hurt them. Because Milan are going to send the ball long, they're going to push midfielders up to try and win the second ball like this, push all their players forward, let's get on the second ball, win this ball, and then we can attack. The problem is if you don't win that ball, and the ball comes this way, there is now this massive gaping hole. And that's exactly what we're going to see for the second goal. We're going to look at this using Once Video Analyzer Pro. I'll leave a link in the description down below. Really good analysis software. I use it on a lot of my videos, a lot of my research as well, so I really recommend that you check it out. But we can see this same pressing situation here. We've got the two strikers on the two centre-backs, with one kind of shadow pressing the centre-back whilst also applying pressure to the goalkeeper. And then we've got Dumfries just behind me as the wing-back, going to press high on Theo Hernandez. What we can see is that the goalkeeper has no clear passing option, because everyone is man for man. The result of this is that Milan therefore is forced to go long. So he's going to send this ball long up towards the forwards. And he's aiming for Olivier Giroud. He's a good target man, but the problem is when you lose this header, if we look here, look at the AC Milan players. AC Milan are gambling. The ball's gone up to Giroud, the aim being that Giroud's going to win the header, Milan can get on the second ball and play from there. But look at the amount of space which they are leaving in the midfield. If they lose this ball, they have no one in midfield, and this is exactly what happens. They lose this ball here, it comes down, it gets plonked into midfield, and Inter are the first on the ball, and that's a big problem for Milan. The ball then kind of gets worked wide by Barella, it's good play, DiMarco at wing-back pushing forward, and then they get into the final third, where we can see that the Milan defenders are 4 versus 4 with the Inter forwards. We've got our 2 wing-backs pushing forward onto the full-backs, 2 strikers on the 2 centre-backs, which is going to allow Mkhitaryan to kind of ghost in from the edge of the box. Tonali doesn't track him, the centre-backs do quite awfully. To be honest, if we just highlight the 2 centre-backs here real quick, if you just watch these two, they're actually going to end up in line with each other, which is horrendous. Tomori's dealing with this is awful, so is Theo Hernandez. Tonali as well on the edge, it's awful defensively, individually. It's really bad. Because if we look here, if we look at the 2 centre-backs, our 2 centre-backs are now in a line here. That cannot happen. It's awful from Tomori the way he got dragged here. Theo, there's no intensity to kind of cover this space, and it allows Mkhitaryan to break through in on goal and score and double the lead. We'll come on to the first goal a bit later on, but it's awful, and it all comes from that Inter press. Inter pressing super high, giving Milan no options on the ball, and it leads to these turnovers. Now, like I said, that was actually the second goal. Again, we'll come on to the first goal in a minute, because again, it comes from just silly thinking from AC Milan. But once Inter have this second goal, they don't need to go for this high press anymore. Now, about 20 minutes in, they're a bit more happy to kind of sit off and say, go on Milan, you can have the ball, because we know you're not actually very good at breaking teams down. And this suited Inter perfectly. But again, tactically from Milan, it was really, really poor. So they're setting up in sort of this 2-4-3-1 sort of shape here. But they're making the pitch almost too big. The gaps are too big. The centre-backs were too deep for my liking. The wingers were too high and wide. And the midfield was too far apart. The full-backs are too wide. And again, it leads to the same problems. The main issue here initially, though, is that the centre-backs are a bit too deep. Because what this means is that Dzeko and Martinez are happy to stand off and let them have the ball. Because now what Inter have created is a 5 versus 3 in their favour in the middle of the park. So let's say that the centre-back wants to try and play into the midfield. Inter are going to instantly win this ball. And then, again, like I said, it's a 5 versus 3 in the middle here. So they win the ball, and it's so dangerous. They've got a lot of real technicians in here with Barella, Calhanoglu and Mkhitaryan. A lot of really good technicians on the ball. Plus, given the fact that they're in a 5 versus 3, so they've got 2 spare men. Again, it's just far too easy for Inter. And again, this made them really, really dangerous in transition. And again, it allowed them to get at a really exposed Milan defence. Now, the good defensive work didn't stop there. Because what we can see is that with all these Inter players quite narrow, it means that the ball for AC Milan to play is out wide to the fullbacks. And the fullbacks had pretty much the most touches in the game, Calabria and Theo Hernandez. Now, you might think that the typical solution here would be for Dumfries to come apply pressure to the ball and to shift into a back 4. But Inter didn't actually do that once they had their 2-0 lead, because again, they don't need to push their wing-backs forward, so they leave them in these deeper positions. Instead, what we see is Barella coming out into this area, Calhanoglu is going to come here to Krunic, Mkhitaryan on Tonali here, and again, they've gone man for man in the midfield. Diaz might look like the spare man, but as they are 3 versus 1 against Giroud, they can use the spare centre-back to go press Diaz. So I have just realised the camera stopped working. I don't know how long ago that stopped, so apologies if you guys haven't been able to see this beautiful face. But to get back to the analysis, where were we? Inter are using this kind of wide ball to the fullback as the trigger for Inter to move across, press, put pressure on the ball, win the ball, turn it over, and then go direct, straight into their front 2. This big man, Edin Dzeko, the smaller player, Lautaro Martinez, an old school striker pairing. One big, one little, they're going to move about and cause chaos, but importantly, they're man-to-man with the 2 centre-backs. And again, like in every other situation all over the pitch, the strikers won their individual battles. Tomori had an absolute nightmare of a game, he couldn't get close to Dzeko, but between Dzeko and Martinez, they were just far too good. Then again, you've got these late runners from either Mkhitaryan, Calhanoglu, Barella, it might have been a wing-back getting forward as well. They just completely overwhelmed AC Milan. AC Milan in possession, the distances between the players were far too big, it left their midfield far too open, which meant that Inter could transition really easily. But Inter deserve credit because defensively their approach was spot on. It was really good. It was really brave and bold. High risk, but high reward, and it really paid off. But the other thing that I just want to quickly look at is the first goal. And it comes from a set piece. And again, it's just a bit odd from Milan for me. Again, it feels like watching a bit of an old school game. And it comes from this free kick. Where for me, the line is just why are they so deep? Why is the AC Milan defensive line this deep? You're just inviting a ball into the box. You are asking the opposition to put the ball in this area here. You're just giving them free yardage in your own box. I don't really understand the idea behind it. Now, if you actually look when this ball comes into the box, if you look where this ball ends up, it ends up quite poor. It ended up on the edge here. I don't know if you guys saw that. It ended up here. What I don't get is if the AC Milan defence had been that high in the first place, they easily head this ball away. Because it was an awful delivery. So it's an easy one, just punch away with your head. And it clears the danger. But because their line is so deep, this ball actually ends up going behind for the corner. And this is what leads to the first goal. The corner's going to come into the box. We've got Edin Dzeko up against Calabria here, which is a mismatch. Inter kind of identify the fact that this is a mismatch. We can see it here. I mean, physically, Dzeko's always going to bully Calabria in this position. And then it's a really good finish. Good delivery. Really good finish. This was obviously the first goal. But again, it's just something I wanted to touch on. Because again, the whole thing was just wrong from Pioli. The whole setup. Whether it was defensively in open play, on the ball in open play in particular, was really bad. But also defensively at set pieces. Just not sure what AC Milan were doing in this game. But Inzaghi and Inter deserve a lot of credit. And I'm sure Inter fans really enjoyed that win. They thoroughly deserved it. The second leg will be really interesting. Hopefully, for the sake of the neutral, Rafa Leao will be back for AC Milan. It should make it a more interesting game. If he isn't, I'm not sure how Milan get back into this tie. But we will have to wait and see. If it is a good, entertaining game, then I will, of course, cover it on the channel next week. So make sure you subscribe for that. Apart from that, that's all I've got to say for today's video. Inter really deserved this. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I will see you in the next one.